Okay, so thank you guys for hanging in all day, and this is the last one, so hopefully it's fun to listen to. So we are Team 13. This is us. We all come from very different backgrounds. We all had a part in the final solution, and we're all going to be presenting it today. And I thought what Alex had said earlier in the week was very compelling. He had this quote actually printed on his slide. I'm assuming it's from him, but I'm not 100% sure. But this is a complicated task. And this is an opportunity for us as a designer, engineer, whatever you might be, to really step up and have a career defining moment, which I thought was really awesome. And what we're going to cover in the next 10 minutes are a lot of things. So hopefully we'll get through all of it. And I'm going to hand it over to my team.
Okay, so thanks, Sabrina. So within the context of the UN SDGs, we identified 3 main goals relevant to this project. So goal 7, to provide affordable and clean energy with 2030 targets for improving energy efficiency and access to universal modern energy services. Goal 11 is to build sustainable cities and communities to protect and preserve our natural heritage and prioritize safety, inclusion, accessibility of green public spaces. And finally, goal 17, to acknowledge the importance of partnerships by promoting public, private, and civil society partnerships. Next slide, please. So what got us here, from a list of 94 calls to action submitted to the federal government by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the 2 mentioned here are relevant from a health perspective to acknowledge and recognize the needs of the Indigenous population, and a commemoration standpoint to prioritize funding and encourage collaborative projects contributing to the reconciliation process. The second document from York University calls for the need to establish social and community spaces, recognizing a sense of belonging for Indigenous cultures and communities within the university, and promote a culture of inclusion by ensuring that the perceptions and experiences of the Indigenous community members are reflected in university life. Now I hand it to Theo, who will take us through our approach.
Thank you. So we are looking at an approach where, first of all, we get the context through our stakeholder empathy mapping, the historical context and the policy within which this building is going to be worked on. And then we look at the barriers and opportunities involved in the retrofit. And next, we move on to the building model, energy use, experience, and productivity. And we focus on our own interventions. So what do we specifically recommend for this building? And lastly, post retrofits, how do we continuously improve this building? How do we keep it sustainable throughout its lifetime? So going back to Sabrina.
So we kicked it off by doing some empathy mapping. The panel discussion earlier in the week was so helpful. So we did create some personas. We looked at what their priorities were. We looked at their major pains and gains. And then, of course, our residents and visitors. So the panel discussion that was also hosted around accessibility design was also very informative for an empathy map. So we tried to take all of that feedback and incorporate every, pain and gain and check the boxes to make sure that our solution and adjacent programming to our solution covered our users.
So we've attempted to give a broad overview of the policies that are applicable to the site, starting with the Okanagan Charter, which was brought up earlier this week, emphasizing the need to create supportive campus environments by identifying opportunities to study and support health and well-being, as well as sustainability and resilience in the built environments, and to generate thriving communities and a culture of well-being by creating empowered, connected, and resilient campus communities that foster an ethic of care, compassion, collaboration, and community action. The City of Toronto's official plan, Chapter 3, is relevant to include all the elements that are mentioned here, specifically with respect to sections 3.1.1, 3.2.1, 3.2.2, and section 3.4. York University's secondary plan is supportive of complete communities characterized by high density, mixed use urban and transit oriented neighborhoods The Living Well Together Kiel Campus Vision and Strategy document works toward nurturing a dynamic, flourishing, and complete community to demonstrate York's commitment to overall community well-being and environmental stewardship. And finally, the Toronto Green Standard V4, which guides sustainable design and performance requirements, specifically relating to future-proof developments with high performance and quality coupled with low emissions. Next slide, please. So we cannot ignore the historical origins of the land and the Assiniboine residences that the residences are built upon. So within the site context, we wanted to highlight and acknowledge them. Today, the Assiniboine are centered in present-day Saskatchewan. They also inhabit parts of Alberta and southwestern Manitoba in Canada, and northern Montana and western North Dakota in the United States. Now I hand it over to Leo again.
Right. Now we have to look at the opportunities and the barriers involved in this project. First of all, we know that it's going to involve a significant amount of cost to retrofit the building. And then we also have to deal with stakeholders who have different needs and different experiences with this building. And then we have to deal with the policy limitations of the city and the institution itself. And then we also have to consider public perception of the project. That's going to affect how it's going. And as a building we're going to renovate, we can't make so many changes to the structure and the building envelope. So that's also brings limitations on what can be done to the building. On the other hand, we also have opportunities. So we know that the building lacks a communal space, and then we can take this opportunity to build social space for community. And then we also were able to engage the staff and the students during the boot camp and to learn more about what they experience in the community and how they would like this building to be changed. We also have the opportunity to deal with the accessibility, the lighting, the HVAC system, which are like low-hanging fruits because we can easily make improvements to them. The next slide, please. So for this project, we suggest a different approach to the building modeling. We already know the typical building model, which is the energy model. And we just have our energy metrics, like energy use intensity and the thermal energy used. Now, this tells us a lot about the quantity of energy used, but it doesn't tell us about the quality of energy used. So we can say, okay, for this size of building, this amount of energy is being used. That's an energy use metric. But what does it tell us about the user experience? So we suggest a user experience model being built for this building. So through an empathy map or focus groups, we can develop a metric whereby we measure the energy used relative to the positive experiences of the users as against their total experiences within the building. Similarly, for productivity, when we want to compare different buildings, we often benchmark buildings and we say this building has this energy use intensity and so on. And we think because they are similar buildings, they are both residential use buildings, then they have a comparable metric. But it's not really true because you can have two residential buildings with very different energy use intensities. And the one with a poorer use intensity might seem to have a poorer performance, but they don't necessarily have that because that depends on what exactly this building is producing. So we can talk about the productivity metric. For instance, in this case, we think of the return on spending index by the Standard & Poor's, which is adopted for educational institutions, which could help as a very useful way of actually being able to evaluate how effective the building is performing and how effective the retrofit is going to be. Next slide, going over to Fedos.
Thank you, Theo. Our intervention is implementing solar energy systems because of tourism. First, because of sustainable goals and long-term durability of these systems, and second, the high heating demand in Canada, of course. If we imagine this building as a box, we have a roof, facade, and its windows, which in the previous presentations, it was shown that the facade is a bit distinct because of the windows, and the windows are actually really small, and the roof we have limitation in all these parts, and the roof is its area is a bit small compared to the facade. Next slide, please. If one way to improve the windows efficiencies to implement semi-transparent PV technologies, which we can generate electricity. Even it's it's less than silicon-based PVs, but they are more homogeneous in visual, and we can have more beautiful view in the building. The facade, I think, which is the most important component in this building, can be attached by building integrated photovoltaic thermal system. Actually, I think if we want to use PV, it's better to be thermal, and we use its waste heat as preheating for AHU system, or defrosting for HRV system. It's obvious because of the outdoor temperature in this city. And it's not a complicated system. Even if we use fan to have an airflow in the backside of the PV, but this would be better than just implementing a PV and attach it directly to the facade. The third system can be solar thermal collector systems, which can be implemented at the roof. I think in the roof we have two options: using PV with a proper angle to the south, or using thermal collectors for as an auxiliary system for hot water demand. And it's where we should, I think, simulate both these systems, considering the building's situation and its demand. And yes, we can, I think, use both of the systems. And from now, I will hand over this to Sabrina.
So to wrap up, and I know we're likely a minute away from time, the adjacent offerings to the PV intervention is a dashboard. This is for internal and external use for both efficiency and operations, but also to tie into potential immersive experiences. So while you're monitoring for continuous improvement, you're also using some of that data to inform some real-time installations through the use of technology, the use of placemaking, AR and AI to make it as accessible as possible. And then, of course, bringing it back to, and I used Terry Cross's interpretation of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was taken from the Blackfoot, but around our hierarchy of needs, connecting to our spirituality, our sense of belonging, and bringing all of that technology, making it a human experience. And then I'm going to call out Queen for this great idea. She wanted to integrate more plants, more greenhouse, and I said, perfect. That's kind of on theme, sunshine, PV. And so we thought, maybe even as an adjacent program to that, let's do an adopt a plant, offer grow lights, offer additional air filtration in your own room, and then potentially a greenhouse that could maybe be integrated and managed by a horticultural program, create some revenue with a plant subscription program, because right now everything seems to be costing money. So where's their revenue stream? Maybe through a subscription service. So I think that completes our presentation. Thank you, everyone.
You guys can't hear it, but there are so many wows happening in this room right now. Oh my, yeah. Who wants to start? Leslie. Oh, sorry, Victoria, go ahead.
I mean, I don't really have a question. I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to usurp your time. I think you did a fantastic job. I really love how much you've taken pieces from everything that you heard and really made it your own, like looked into it and explored it and translated it into a very unique and forward-thinking approach, and then went beyond, right, by really that immersive experience. I love that. And thinking even about a revenue stream, and I'm just wanted to applaud the team. I think all the teams have done a great job. I just this one resonated with me a lot because obviously the truth and reconciliation, the equity, diversity, and inclusion, the accessibility, looking into all the main drivers of why these things are important, and the energy use metrics, and making, like, translating that into why do you do these things, and having metrics and measurement capabilities for those different areas. It's that very, very, very comprehensive. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to go next to echo Leslie. I think this was a very client perfected presentation. You understood York's goals. You put SDGs in there. You actually took it back to the roots of the NSM, of the Assiniboine tribe, and it was such a holistic presentation. Even putting in, I think you called it the empathy maps.
Yeah.
Just understanding the self and putting it into everything you proposed. It was such greater thinking, and I just really, really applaud you for this. This is actually something that we always look at the financial constraints, but when you approach a team with, hey, this is your goal, this is what you've made a statement for, and this is how we can do it in a holistic approach. I really appreciated that, and it was a really well done presentation. So good job on to this team.
I'll jump in. And I'll echo what everybody said for every group. It was really lovely to see different approaches and really finding the area that called on you and making your own. And every presentation had a very personal element, which is, I think, the point of this conversations, is to bring people together to have different views. You know me, I like energy models, but also like beyond energy. So when you bring something like productive plans and you bring metrics beyond that, like I'm really excited about that. I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on those metrics themselves, and how you kind of would plan from a kind of process perspective to bring them into an analysis.
I can't speak technically on the exact metrics, but I would assume, and Ferdo and Theophilus, jump in, you guys are the experts in this realm, but I would assume it would be around the efficiency of the intervention. And actually, Theophilus, you had, I think I actually wrote it on one of the slides, because you had a really good way of describing what we should be measuring, and I wrote it down. And there was so much text on that, so give me a second. Internal and external platform designed for students, faculty, and community, monitor and learn from PV intervention. Okay, energy productivity metrics, proposed energy use per unit output, introduce energy use relative to user experience, proposed energy use per weighted ratio of positive experience during duration to total experience duration. And this is all Theophilus, I think who wrote that down. I don't know if that answers your question. And then post occupancy metrics compared to pre, like benchmarking.
It's what we need to start doing more, is looking beyond just energy. It brings in the challenges that you guys face in terms of how do you quantify happiness? How do you quantify productivity? Theo, you made some really good points in terms of specific metrics we could use to kind of proxy for those as a concept is great. And I think even just the process of thinking through it from that lens and just leave you with this note, like we measure energy, greenhouse gas emissions based on the size of a building. And that to me, it's kind of equivalent of measuring kind of when we measure car efficiency on like some X liters per kilometer traveled. We don't build cars to travel, we build cars to move people. And I think when we bring those metrics into the occupant side and we turn energy use per occupant, for instance, just a simple change in your denominator adds a lot more depth to and brings it to the human side as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I just wanted to comment on that and really kind of get us thinking beyond just per area or per cost, which are the easy ways to look at it. So thank you.
I wanted to follow up just on what you're saying there, Sebastian. I'm wondering, first of all, I should say that was an amazing presentation. I really loved that, and that touched my heart as well. I certainly found myself researching Assiniboine history and culture and exploring sort of how that was brought in. So I'm glad that you covered that in the presentation. But just sort of on the tangent of what Sebastian was saying just now, I'm wondering if you come across exergy analysis as one of the things that you can look at for building performance. I mean, wouldn't purport to be the expert on this, but just to describe it briefly, exergy speaks to sort of the potency of energy that's used. It gives us another way of measuring in terms of what is the capability of the energy that you're using. For example, when we combust gas, that is high exergy when it's not actually demanded. When our goal is to bump the temperature to room temperature, why are we burning something that's combustion and thousands of degrees and it's sort of like in a way a higher expense type of energy.
Yeah, I mean we haven't used exergy. I mean, we talk about the concept of grading of energy as it relates to what you're saying. Over the last year or so, I made a conscientious push to stop talking about energy and focus on carbon. In my mind, if energy was carbon free, use energy. Perhaps a controversial statement there, but it's all about like carbon is really what's behind a lot of the things we're seeing. And within carbon, you also have that equivalent of exergy in terms of not just the amount of carbon dioxide, but the impact. And there are ways to evaluate like carbon dioxide that's produced today, or like the impact of carbon dioxide in time is also really important. So definitely start peeling beyond just the one metric we all hear, greenhouse gas emission intensity, energy use intensity. The more we can dig into it and pose questions like the ones this presentation brought in, like how can we start measuring energy from productivity? We've used things like like in residential buildings, it's vacant rate as a matter of a metric that evaluates kind of how people are engaging with the building, sick days and sick leave in an office space. There's ways to get around it. It's always hard, and it's always subjective, and we're meshing the subjectiveness of kind of quality of life into the hardcore modeling of things, and not everybody's comfortable with that, but the conversation is very much needed. So yes, let's start talking about grades of energy. Let's start talking about impact of greenhouse gas emissions. Let's start talking about people. Let's go back to talking about people, and going back to this presentation, that was really, really thoughtful and very considered to look at it and take a step back, all the way back, not just at the beginning of the building, and using that framework forward. So from this team, I took that. From all the other teams, I took elements of them. So I participated in this boot camp since they started, and it's always the best part of the week is this one, is when we get to hear from you and we get to deepen our knowledge, because we have been doing this for a while, but our ideas are kind of our ideas. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your processes.
Yeah, I'd really like to echo Seba's thoughts about, we do this for you, and we do this very selfishly. It's when you're in the professional world, you lose that connection to the dream and the vision that you have when you're a student. We were all students before, and we all remember that feeling of hope. And you guys continue to just transmit that hope and that feeling that we can and must and will do better. So, oh my goodness. I was so touched, I cried in that last presentation, I have to say. And it's not to diminish the other presentations, because the other presentations really, truly, each of you showed the team. Each of you showed how, and this is the reality. And that to me was the most important lesson we can Sobel building, and we've heard over and over in the hundreds of projects that we've done as a team with Savings by Design, is that it's not about big budgets, it's about teams. It really is. Good teams and good communication is how you get good building. And the better the team, the better the building very often. And people not afraid to ask, and people not afraid to speak up. So we hope that these are lessons that you can also, take away from this portion.